Aloha, folks. You know what time it is. Here we again with another episode with Ho'i Kaika and my brother, who's been gracious enough to be up late at night. He's in California right now. It's like 10 o'clock over there. Woo. And he has a whole bunch of children that keep him busy, so he needs to fall asleep soon. But he was kind enough to put some time aside. This guy I've known for, I think, about 20 years, bro, roughly. And
at least.
Right? And I ever since I've hooked up with him and his brother and the rest of his family, they've always opened their doors up to me and the rest of the guys that are living on the mainland, trying to make them feel comfortable and whatnot. And we just got real close, and we're still friends to this very day. And I'll let him tell more about himself. I won't brag about him. I'll let him tell you more about himself. But I'm going to introduce you to my brother, Mike Palmer. Go ahead.
My brother, appreciate it. Awesome. Thanks for letting me come on and talk story with you. Always a pleasure. So I guess I can start from the beginning, right? Born in Hawaii. My dad was in the Air Force. So we moved a little bit when I was born. I was the youngest of 5 kids for a long time, and then I had a little brother 6 years after I was born. So there's some time between us. In that time, though, we moved from Hawaii to New Jersey and then back to Hawaii. We lived on Hickam Air Force Base when I was first born, and then McGuire Air Force Base in New Jersey. And then we moved out to Hau'ula when we moved back to Hawaii. And so we went from Air Force Base to the country. And so, yeah, it was great growing up on that side of the island. I still dream about it today. My childhood, being that close to the ocean, that close to the mountains, bro, it's paradise. When people talk about paradise, bro, and I tell them, I describe what that side of the island looks like, bro, they immediately go, man, I can't wait to see this place. So, yeah, man, we were pretty lucky growing up. Mango trees and banana trees and papayas in our backyard and mountain apple, all those things, man. It was, when people hear me talk about Hawaii, man, they get jealous really quick because, it's Hawaii, it's a beautiful place. Everybody recognizes it as, a beautiful island or beautiful islands, right? And they call it paradise. And that's, we're so blessed to come from that place, to be born on that island and to live there, And
I'm trying to get this brother to come back. Hurry up, bro.
It's in the plan. It's in the plans.
We got to get the band back together again.
Yeah. Oh. And so I'll just, I guess, just to add, right? So I grew up a little bit in Hau'ula, I consider my home. That's my home. But then in my teenage years, my dad got a job with United Airlines and we moved to San Francisco. And so going back the other way, a boy from the country on a small island, going into San Francisco, big city, lots going on, very diverse. All kinds of things happening. Just so much to get used to. And if I'm being honest, I hated living in San Francisco. It was like the hardest thing for me. It was a huge culture shock, right?
Yeah.
I was used to wearing shorts and slippers every day. When I went to school in shorts and slippers, they sent me home and told me I'd be suspended because I had to wear jeans. Or pants, and I was just like, why? What's the big deal? And I had to buy shoes, you know what I mean? And I was like, what? Hey, I'm here because I have to be here, not because I want to be here. So if you're telling me I don't have to show up, I'm happy with that, so came to California. And what's interesting, Gavon, I was thinking about this the other day, is like, at this point in my life, I've lived in California longer than I ever lived in Hawaii,
Oh, crap. I never thought of that. I never thought of that.
Bro, I've been up here for that long. And so, it's interesting for me to say that, but like, in my heart, in my mind, I've never left Hawaii, bro. That's always going to be home no matter what.
Yeah, you can take the boy from the island.
That's right.
Not the island from the boy. Hey, could you talk a little bit about your education actually, could you talk about your ethnicities too? Like what's your ethnicity?
Yeah, well, this is bro, like a lot of us, we're mixed, right? And so my dad is from New Zealand, so he's half Maori, and his dad is from here. Actually, his dad is from San Francisco, but his grandfather on his dad's side is from Italy. So he's 50% Italian, 50% Maori. And then my mom, she grew up in Kahana Bay, not too far from Hau'ula. And, on her records, it looks like she's like 100% Hawaiian. But if you go back a couple of generations, you can see that she has a little bit Chinese, a little bit French, and so a little bit of that happening. That's what we know. Who knows what else is mixed up in there? I mean, my dad being from New Zealand, his last name is Palmer, right? So like somewhere along the lines, some Englishman jumped into the line. You know what I mean? That's how we have the Palmer name. But that's the background. That's our ethnicity. My wife, I have, she's from Kaneohe. She's Hapa. She's Chinese, Hau'ula, and we have 4 kids, and all of them born here in California. But man, we try to get back home to Hawaii as often as possible.
Beautiful kids. They can apply for any scholarship they like.
Crossing our fingers, bro. That's what we need is scholarships, because I don't want to be paying all that money for college. I tell you that.
Tell me about it, man. The help. We all need all the help we can get. What about your education and your career? Education and career.
Yeah. So I'm currently a tax consultant. I work for PricewaterhouseCoopers. Been there for about like 20 years. I'm a director there, and I've worked up and down the coast or the West Coast. A lot of my clients are national, so I have clients all over the country. So I've been blessed to travel and see different parts of this nation and get to know people from different areas, and that's been an awesome experience. My education. So I started. Actually, I had never planned on going to college, if I'm being honest. When I was growing up in Hawaii, all I wanted to do was surf. That was it, bro. Like if I could figure out a way to get a job that would allow me to surf all the time, that's what I wanted to do, and it didn't even matter. So growing up, I had this idea that I'd work somewhere in tourism or, hospitality management, something like that, where it would be flexible enough. Like if the surf was up, I could take off. And one of the things we used to do when we were growing up in Hau'ula is like we would go surf before school, go to school dripping wet. As soon as that bell rang after school, we went right back to the ocean. You know what I mean? And so that was how I viewed things. And then when we moved from Hawaii to California, like again, another reason why I hate it is the water up here is freezing, bro. You're not jumping in this water, especially if you're from Hawaii. You're like, there's no way. And the water is not. I mean, it looks gray and brownish, not clean. So there's no, you're not really motivated to jump in that water. So came up here, and really took probably like 2 or 3 years for me to get comfortable living in California. But after I did, and I started looking at things, a little bit different, right? I got to know people here, started to, build a network of friends, met some family up here. And so, I started getting a little bit more comfortable. And one of the things that changed was how I looked at my future. I realized that I needed to do more than there had to be more. And I think I naturally would have come to that, realization living in Hawaii. But like, I think up here, all my friends, all their parents, helped them prepare for college. And even then, I still wasn't sure I wanted to go to college. It had never been a dream of mine. I wasn't very good in school. So, I mean, academics wasn't my thing growing up. So I always thought, well, look, I'll be some sort of labor worker, mechanic, something like that along those lines, something to pay the bills, but never had any high aspirations. Started working at the airport, working on the ramp, baggage handler. And as I was there, I worked for a lot of people who, weren't very bright, if I'm being honest, like nice people, but, I was questioning like, why am I working for this price? They're the manager and I'm just the worker, right? And I was like, man, these guys, they're doing their job, but like they're not thinking beyond that, right? And I remember like sitting there looking at my boss at the time and just going, man, I can't believe I work for this guy. Again, nice guy, wasn't like wasn't like he was a mean person or just something like, but I kept like he would say things or do things, and I was like, man, I think I could do this so much better, right? And so while I was there for like 6 months, and the upper management asked me if I wanted to be a manager, and I was like, well, what does it take to be a manager? And they were like, basically just do that job better than that guy over there, right? And I was just like, oh, okay, I certainly can do that, and so I started to do that, but then I realized I was like, I don't see myself doing this for a long time. And at the time, my girlfriend at the time was going to college, and she was like, "Why don't you go to college? Like you can go to college." And I was like, "Oh man, I was never good at school. I was never, I only made sure I had grades good enough to play football or play sports, whatever it was, right? So my average in high school was like 2.3, 2.8 on a good year or a good semester, if I was like, took all the easy classes or something like that. And so got into college. I started at a JC in San Mateo, and I started taking classes and just doing the general recs. And I was always pretty good at math, and so I was taking applied calculus. And in that class, I became really good friends with my professor, and we would talk about all kinds of things. And one of the things that we would talk about was the stock market. And so he would tell me, he would give me like, scenarios. He's like, if this, and this would happen, you can make this kind of money, right? He taught me about shorting stocks and things like that. I mean, conceptually, like not all the details, but conceptually. And he would tell me about the taxes on, when you make gains on selling stocks, and when you have losses and how you can use those and how you can offset other income, right? Anyway, one day we got into a conversation, and I started like thinking about it and like, oh, why don't you do this? I started like asking him questions of like how to, I'll say, navigate the tax laws, right? And he looked over at me. He's like, "You should be a lawyer." And I was like, "You like, bro, you're crazy, right?" Like, I mean, first of all, I'm not a good reader. Comprehension is not my thing. And he was like, "No, but the way you think, the way you thought about that is like a lawyer would think about it." And he's like, "You should really entertain that." And he's like, "At least be an accountant." He's like, have you taken any accounting classes?" And at that time, I just started my accounting class, and I was like, "I'm just starting now." He's like, "Come talk to me, after the semester's over, and tell me what you think." So I went back and he said, "What did you think of that class?" And I was like, "Yeah, it was cool. It was okay. I mean, look at me. I'm not the accounting type, right? Like I just, guys like me don't become accountants." And he said, "Well, what did you think? Was it a hard class?" And I was like, no, it was pretty straightforward. I understood. And he's like, "You should be an accountant." And I was like, "No thanks," right? Like that's not in the cards for me. Like I was never good in school. I'm only doing this because I'm trying to figure out what I want to do with my life. And at the time, I was like in a fire science program, looking to be a fireman, and so continued on in that path. And when I got later on, like it was like a year later, I was almost done with all of my fire science core classes, and I was invited to go to. I knew the chief of a fire chief, and he invited me to come to his firehouse and go to this kind of like district conference where there's multiple firefighters, and they were there on a panel and talking about the experience. And when I got there, one of the first things I noticed is everybody was Hau'ula, bro. Like everybody. There were like a handful of non-Hau'ula guys there, students as well as the peoples on the panel, as well as the firefighters just kind of hanging out. And kind of sat there. I know it was noticeable, right? Sat there, went through it. Afterwards, I talked to the fire chief, and I asked him, I was like, "Oh, how many like minorities you guys have in your firehouse?" He goes, "Oh, my current firehouse, we don't have any." And so that started a conversation where I was like, "Well, what does that look like? Like other firehouses?" And he was like, "It's like 10%. At that time, it was like 10% in the state was like they were like minorities."
Oh, that's shocking.
And it was shocking. And I was like, huh. So basically, if any firehouse I go to, I'm going to be the only non-white person there. That didn't bother me as much as like when you're that close to people, you're living with them, you're sleeping next to them, right, in bunks or whatever the situation is. You guys got to be really tight. You know what I mean? And like, I at that point in time, I already like had a lot of Holly friends and they're cool people, but I knew that I grew up different from them. I just had a different look on life, different approach. I was raised different. Again, not good or bad, not saying anything like that, but just different, right? And like if I'm living or sleeping next to somebody, I got to be comfortable with them. So my idea of what my career needed to be changed because I started to feel uncomfortable being in that environment, and so I ultimately said I can't do this, right? And the chief understood, and he knew where I was coming from. He's like, yeah, you got to be okay with that, and you got to be okay. The way he described it was like it's kind of like a frat, you know what I mean? It's like there's people are going to mess with you, right? All in good fun. But you got to be able to handle that. And I thought about it. I was like, I don't think this is where I want to be. You know what I mean? And he understood. And I said, I got to figure something out. And I thought I should be in business, And so I was switching over my major to marketing. And I ran into my calculus professor again. And he's like, hey, so when you taking the CPA exam, just kind of joking with me, and I said, that's funny. And I kind of just blew him off and I started in the marketing. And then with that as well, like I started, I really liked it, took on some marketing jobs, internships, and like really enjoyed it. The whole idea of working with people, talking with people, understanding what their needs were and how like understanding our customers and how to present things and what are some of the natural procedures in building value in your product and being able to push that out to the world, right, to the customer, to the industry, to the market. And so all of that was fun until I ended up at this job, and I moved at this time. I moved out to Utah because for lack of a better term, I just wasn't living the best life in San Francisco. So I moved out to Utah and started going to Utah Valley University but back then it was called UVSC. And I took a marketing class there, had a couple of bradas with me from Kauai in the classes. And so we're all pretty happy. We're pretty stoked that finally, right, like, I'm back with the bradas again. And so stuck it out through a few classes, but got into a job where I was asked to market products, that I didn't really believe in. And, that was my job, you know what I mean? And so obviously I did the best job I could, but, like I just didn't feel good about the products. I didn't feel good about the target market that they were pushing these products to. And it was like, looking back, it wasn't really that bad. But back then I thought, I was like, how can I do this? Right. Went to my marketing professor and she basically said, hey, like, it's a job, right? You got to look at it as a job. It's not your own life decision. You work for that company. You're asked to figure out campaigns and marketing strategies and things like that, working with that company. That's just your job, right? And she goes, I hate to tell you this, but that's going to happen in your career, right? Now, you got to make a decision, like, are you going to continue working for this company? Because it's a company thing, right? It's not necessarily, what you're doing. It's the company and their product, right? Well, time went on and I had to quit that job, but I realized I didn't want to do that either. So now I'm two careers, two majors in, and I'm looking at myself and like, I'm thinking, what I need to do is just go back to some sort of labor, you know what I mean? And that's where I was like, working at the airlines would be good, flight benefits, things like that. And then, bro, I got on my knees and I was just like, I had to ask God, bro. I was just like, what do I do? I've tried a few things. I've messed up in a lot of places. I've gone down the wrong path, on a few different things. I'm like, what do I do? And it immediately, what came back in my mind was my calculus professor just saying, hey, you should be a lawyer or at least an accountant. And so it just kept sitting in my head, right? Went back to school the next day, talked to my marketing professor. She said, we got a great accounting program here, and she said, let me introduce you to the dean of accounting. And so I went over there, and she introduced me, and I talked to him, and he was, I mean, he's kind of what you think of as an accountant, right? Like he was a bit of a nerd looking guy, really smart, knew his stuff. And I was extremely intimidated because I was like, that's not me, I'm not that smart, this is not my thing. But what he told me was he asked me, he said, if you're good at math, you'll be fine in accounting. If you can, if you can basically add numbers together and track numbers, you can do this. Believe me. And I said, all right. He said, look, just give it a try. Just give it a try and see how it goes. And so I said, fine, I'll take some classes and see how it goes. And every class that I took was pretty easy for me. And I won't say easy like I was getting straight A's easy, but like I got it. You know what I mean? Whereas other classes, I really had to focus, really had to push and do my best to stay in it, right? Whereas these accounting classes were like, oh, okay, that makes sense. It all was logical to me, and it made sense to me. And so I just kept going with it. And, I just noticed like, oh, I have actually pretty decent grades, and I was like, I've never had grades like this in my life. And so I was like, oh, okay, I'll just keep going with this, And one day, there was a career fair going on. It's called the Hall of Flags. And they had a career fair going on, and I had to walk through the Hall of Flags to get to my class. So as I'm walking through, I see all these, booths set up. And one of my buddies is talking to somebody, and he sees me. He's like, hey, come over here. And I talk to him, and he's like, are you applying? Are you talking to any of these, these jobs, these companies here? And I was like, no, I mean, I'm like 2 years out from graduating, or it felt like that. I had some time, and I was like, this is, it'd be a little early for me to start talking to these recruiters or these people from these companies. And he's like, you should, man. There's a lot of good companies here. And I said, okay, maybe I'll check it out. And I looked over to the side of me, and there was like a FBI booth. And I was like, oh, that's cool. And I was like, man, I wonder what kind of, people they're looking for. Walked up, talked to the recruiter, and she goes, right now we're looking for accountants. She goes, what's your major? And I go, accounting. And she was like, oh, then let's talk. And so we start chatting, right? And I'm thinking FBI, you know what I mean? Like, let's be, I wanted to be Keanu Reeves, right? FBI agent from Point Break, you know what I mean? So like holding a gun, that's what I wanted. But, they were looking for something else, and that was okay. Like, but she said, hey, look, you can still be an agent and all that. And it was still interesting enough for me to talk to her. Now, directly next to her was a booth for an accounting firm. And I didn't know, I saw the booth, but I didn't know what the accounting firm, never heard of the accounting firm. But the guy overheard me talking to the FBI agent, and he's like, hey, I heard you're an accounting major. And I said, yeah, I'm an accounting major. He goes, he's like, yeah, I work for PwC. We're an accounting firm. And he's like, where are you from? And so he started just asking me just kind of basic questions and just talking to me, getting to know me. And as I was talking to him, we found out that the high school that he went to was the same high school I graduated, or not same high school, but was a high school that I played football against every year here in California. And so that sparked up a different conversation. And he essentially said, hey, man, like sign up for an application, sign up for an interview. I'm going to get you in and I'll interview you. And I was like, whoa, I'm like a year and a half away from graduating. He's like, timing's perfect, just sign up. Right. And it's like, all right, fine. In my mind, I'm thinking, whatever, they're not going to call. They had, at that time, I was like number 40 out of a ton of people. And so got, put my name down, and like 2 weeks later, he calls me up and says, hey, we want to interview you. And again, man, I think back to myself, and I'm like, is this real? Is this real? Because like, I don't know if they want me, yeah, I'm an accounting major, but man, I don't have any good grades. Long story short though, brah, I am number 40 on that list. Out of 40 people, only 3 of us got offers. And the other 2 guys who got offers were the top of the class. These were the straight A students, answered every question, did everything that the professors ever asked them, all of that. and somehow I weaseled my way in. I look back at it. It was just my upbringing, my approach, where I've been in my life, right? All of those things that I talked about, trying different things out, came up in that interview when he talked to me. And I think overall, he looked at me as someone who had a very different perspective on life, but had the drive to do different things and try different things. And ultimately, I got a job, working for PwC, which has been a great opportunity for me, and a great job, and given me a lot of introductions to people that I would never think of, right? Different companies, major companies, global companies, where I'm sitting in the room with the CEO or the CFO, and we're talking like you and I are talking here. And so, not bad for somebody from Hau'ula.